All right, hello everyone. If you are planning on joining us for DTerm, please make your way to the sanctuary. Also, if you guys on the outsides could move into the two center sections, that would be very appreciated, just to make it a little tighter. Thanks. All right, so my name is Heather Ani. I am on the adult ministries team here at First Cov, and we help plan the DTerm classes. And so today we have Natty Severson with us, also from LDI at Hope Community Church. She is the Senior Director of Discipleship, so she leads the small groups at Hope as well as teaches in LDI and runs their college student ministry. I got to spend a lot of time with Natty when I was in the internship a few years ago, and so she is going to be sharing a little bit with us about kind of more practical ministry skills when it comes to reaching young people and how we can kind of employ those to the benefit of the church.
There you go. Well, hey, whoa, that's hot. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for stopping in here. It's really great to be able to talk to you. Thanks for welcoming us over from Minneapolis. So it was a fun drive. Actually, a lot closer. I've never been to River Falls. This is my first time in River Falls, so I'm very excited to actually see the town, to be here. So thank you. I'm going to go out to lunch after this, so if you have any recommendations, I'd love to hear from the locals. I heard that Paul was here last week, and he went with talking to you, if you weren't here, about what are the generations and who defines which generations, and what are kind of hallmarks or overarching trends within those generations. And of course, every person is different, so when you describe something like that, you're kind of generalizing pretty significantly, but hopefully that was helpful. And then talks about kind of how we're going to look at the different generations. But before we get going, a little bit about me. I actually can spell. It seems my slides didn't quite transition well. That was supposed to say about me, but it says about So this is me and my family. So I am the one in the Gopher sweatshirt. I am a Gopher. I'm a graduate of the University of Minnesota. And I think we can say that here because we're not in Madison, right? There's not a big rivalry. If I'm in Madison, I just hide. I don't talk about being a Gopher. I have 3 kids. So the one on the left in the picture is my second son, Zach. He's a sophomore at NDSU in Fargo. The one in the red sweatshirt is my daughter. She's a freshman at Moorhead State. My husband's in the middle, that's me next, and the next guy over is a senior. He's my oldest kid. He's a senior at Northwestern in St. Paul, and that is his fiance. He recently got engaged. So this is my family. This is what my life looks like. I've worked at Hope since 2007, so coming up on 17 years, and I've gone to Hope actually since 1999, when Hope was a small church plant to the University of Minnesota. And so I've had this just interesting perspective on watching a church change and grow over the course of the last 24 years. That's added some perspective. At Hope, and I don't know how much Paul talked to you about this, our congregation is pretty young. Our average adult age, so if we take the kids off, our average adult age, I think, is 27 or 28. So we have a high congregation of a lot of young adults there. And so what that offers for us is a unique perspective on how do we minister to that. And that age doesn't actually age up with the congregation. I would say when I was 27, the average age was maybe 24 or 25. And so the church is slowly aging, but not chronologically aging. And so that tells us that we have young adults coming in more and more that kind of keeps that age at a lower end. Now, that just gives me a unique perspective. I'm not an expert, so I'm not standing up here telling you, oh, I'm super expert on how to minister to the next generation. But what it has given me is some just practical tools along the way, some thoughts. I've had some thoughts. So what I'd like to talk to you now about is, like it says up there, tools and lenses. So first I'm going to actually start with a lens, and that's just like glasses. You know, when you put on glasses, it's clears things up. Does anyone else? I need reading glasses now, or at least I can't see you very well, because if I put on my glasses for distance, I can't read my notes. So you all are a little bit blurry to me. I'm at that age now. But when I put my glasses on, I can see more clearly, right? It gives me just another way to look at the world. If it's close up, I might need a different set of glasses. So what I'd like to offer you is, one, a lens on how to look at ministry across generation, and then some practical tools that might actually kind of be things that you can engage in as you think about, how do I lead, how do I help? So the model we kind of work with at Hope is leadership development. So we call this leadership development, and as you heard, we're with LDI, the Leadership Development Institute, and what Hope, our church, and the Leadership Development Institute really try to think about is, how do we develop the next generation of leaders? How do we really think about that? So in fashion of a true computer-age generation person, I went with a Wikipedia definition, and it's actually pretty good. It says this: leadership development is the process which helps expand the capacity of individuals to perform in leadership roles within an organization, right? So we have this idea that we are working to help develop leadership skills in the next generation of people, and in our context, that's in the church. So we need to be thinking about, as the church, what is the next generation going to do? And you might have think of like the Titus 2:2 verses, right? How do we train up the next generation? But I think of this verse from Ephesians 4 that says this: to equip his people for works of service, so that the body of Christ may be built up until we reach unity in the faith and in the knowledge of the Son of God, and become mature, attaining to the whole measure of the fullness of Christ. So what we're trying to do when we think about ministering to the next generation, whether we're a boomer and we're trying to consider how to minister to millennials, or whether we're a millennial right now and we're trying to consider how to minister to Gen Z, or whether we're Gen Z and the yet to be named, maybe I've heard Gen Alpha, right? I've also heard iGen, different things like that. And so how are we going to engage and have this idea of creating an environment where leadership development is happening? And you don't have to call it leadership development. You can call it mentoring. You can call it words that really are meaningful to you. But are we doing that as a church? Because if we're not, our church is going to be in trouble, right? It's going to age up, and then it will eventually die with that generation. But we have to be thinking, how do we engage that next generation of people? So the lens I want to kind of start with, and these are just general observations from Nadia, so take it from that. If you have more questions on them specifically, I'd love to talk about them later. So I went with the idea of roadblocks versus on-ramps. So there are roadblocks to leadership development and reaching the next generation that I've seen in our own church, in my own heart, and in other places that I've observed. And there are also then on-ramps, right, that help people come on board to leadership, help them grow in ministry in the church, help them become the church, because, as we know, the future of the church is the next generation. So when I look at my young adult children, I see them not as my children. Of course, I'm their mom, so I still fix their hair and stuff, but I see them, I have to look at them as the next generation of the church, because in 20 years, my kids will probably have more influence in the lives of other people than me. And so I have to start thinking now about, how do I help on-ramp that next generation of people to leadership in the church? All right, so general observations. So first roadblock that I think of is the idol of perfection. Now this is one that may or may not appeal to you. Do we have any perfectionists out there? No one's going to admit it. You can admit it. If you're a perfectionist, it's just that's God has wired some of us to have really high expectations and to really want to do the very best we can for the kingdom of God. And that's not a bad thing, right? But sometimes it becomes almost this idol. If it's not perfect, or somebody got up on stage. So it was a great service, by the way. I really enjoyed the message. I was like, oh, this is perfect. It's good to be at another church and just be blessed by being a part of the service. So thank you for having me. But what if Brian got up here, Brian got up here and he fumbled through the whole thing? He made a mistake. Would we be like, you're out, Brian, you're done? Does he get an opportunity to have a mistake? So what if somebody much younger than Brian came up here and they said something and it flubbed? Would we be like, oh, we're never doing that again? Get the pros back up there, right? We need to create opportunities for people. So the opposite, the on-ramp is expect that mistakes will happen with growth. You have to decide, like, what's your tolerance for mistakes, obviously. We need a service to be intelligible, to be understandable, but it was really great to see young people reading up there, right? They're being a part of the service. They're seeing that their words, their way of participation are valuable. So are we willing to lay down kind of the perfection, right? From whether it is, whether or not you're gonna let somebody else make the brownies even though they might not be good, to are we gonna let somebody be a part of something even though they might not be perfect at it. The second kind of dichotomy I would like to talk about is resistance to change. This is a really hard one. Nobody likes change if it's not on their terms, right? We all like to decide when things change, right? The only kind of people say the only kind of change people like is the one they chose. So it's pretty true. Nobody really loves change, but change can be something we either resist or grab onto. If you find yourself thinking, I never want it to change, that's when you're gonna see a real roadblock to leadership development. Because when new people come on, new ideas happen, right? And that's either scary or good, right? And so what I would challenge you to move toward is just a view that change is healthy. Once again, if we're not changing at all, whoops, I'm just gonna leave that there. If we're not changing at all, see that, you guys could kick me out if you were worshiping the idol of perfection. Just kick that back there. To view change as healthy, right? You don't have to accept every change. We don't change just for the sake of change. That would be really frustrating to everyone if we were just changing every day just to change things up. But have we thought about the ways we need to change, tweak things, maybe even from what we do on Sunday morning to what we serve at the potluck, or the ways we're engaging with the town around us, the city around us? Like, how are we doing those things? Are you willing to acknowledge that change is healthy and that adding new voices to the mix allows for change that will actually help further the cause of this church for the kingdom of God? Next is efficiency. All right. So some of you are challenging this. This one's challenging for me. I like to be efficient. I like to get things done as quickly as possible, as smoothly as possible, and I don't like my efficiency to be messed with. It actually bothers me. Ironically, I'm the director of the Leadership Development Institute at Hope. So this is one that's challenged me because developing leaders takes time. It takes away from our time. So it's not like if I ask, so right here in the audience with me, this is Sadie Berg. Sadie was an intern actually the year after Heather was, and then she did 2 more years, and now she's a resident in our program, and she's actually working on her own ministry strategy right now to go into God's kingdom, or go out of God's kingdom and trash the joint, right? That's what we just say at Hope. Go into the world and trash the joint. All right, in a good way, for God. And so, when Sadie came on board, or when Heather came on board, it wasn't this net gain. When I put them on something and be like, hey, can you take this task? Or they would come to me, they're interested in a task. I didn't get like, oh yeah, okay, now Heather's gonna spend 3 hours on that thing, so that gains me 3 hours back. No, what happens? I need to have an hour-long meeting to explain to Heather what I hope to see and how to do it. Then I need to probably kind of help guide Heather while she's doing it, make sure she feels comfortable. And then we need a debrief. And how much time does that take? Maybe more than 3 hours. So on the front end of leadership development, it's just not efficient. It takes us more time. And it's hard because if you look back to number 1, it takes more time and the outcome might not be as good as if you did it, right? But as people who are thinking about leadership development, we need to set aside that time. So I would encourage you in your staff's hours and in your key leaders' hours to consider, are we giving our staff the hours that we need to develop new leaders, to help grow? Am I, as a leader, giving my own time and heart and laying down some of my need for efficiency in order to do that? All right, I wish I could read those slides, but I actually can't. So we'll just keep going. I have to walk over here every time I switch slides. The next thing is when matter becomes more important than manner. So you like the greater than, you guys kind of got to really dig back to your math days. This is about as sophisticated as my math skills are these days. I watched my son studying for his Calc 4 class, and I thought, wow, not me anymore. And he looked happy to do it, and I thought, yikes. Praise God for his brain. But matter is what we're talking about. It's the subject at hand. So if I was going to define matter, I'd be like, it's the subject at hand, right? So this is the thing we're talking about, the truth I know, what's right or correct or good. And manner is the way we talk about it. So how are we talking about it? What words are we using? And I think and I've observed this, I have boomer parents and I'm a Gen Xer. And so I think there was probably less consideration of manner in our generations. We believed people when they said something was right, and my dad would say things that would very directly, and I would as a child, you just sort of would dismiss it. Not so in today's current generations. That is not how millennials and Gen Z thinkers think. So we have to say at Hope, matter and manner matter. You got that? So it's just a funny play on words. Matter and manner matter. So if I'm going to tell somebody about the truth of Jesus Christ and who he is, and his death on the cross pays the price for our sins, that matters, right? How I say that there's truth there. I'm not going to back down on the truth that Jesus dying for my sins saves me. That's not going to be something I back down on. But how I say it might be the difference between somebody listening and somebody dismissing me, right? And so thinking through your manner. So if manner is something that you struggle with, or you notice that when you talk to other people, especially younger people, they kind of are like, have you guys heard the okay boomer phrase? They okay boomer you, and they pat you on the head, and then they walk away. It might be that they have something going on in their own heart, but it might be your manner. It might be the way you're engaging them. And I could give 3 more talks on manner, honestly. And so just want to throw it out there. All right, next is pride. I think this is definitely something that I see, like we want to hang on to our value. Like we see our own value, but not always as rooted in Jesus, as rooted in the gospel. Pride gets in there. It wiggles its ugly little head in there. And that makes us kind of want to hoard authority and hoard power. We don't want to become meaningless, right? I've noticed as my body doesn't obey me anymore, now when I'm not the first woman picked for sport teams, that was really hard for me. Like I was an athlete, and at one point I was the one people picked, and now I'm not going to be the one people picked, and that's really hard. So I want to hold on to the ways in which I am picked. But pride is not going to get us anywhere. We need to be willing to give away our influence and our power in order to elevate the next generation of leaders. We can't hold on to the fact that we need to have this certain meaning that's not rooted in Jesus, but that's rooted in whatever we can accomplish or what people think and see in us. So we just need to begin to lay those things down. Had to check the time there. Next, here, I can read them this way. Feelings of, that's genius. Feelings of superiority. Paul talked a lot about this last week, so I'm not gonna begrudge this one too much. But it's this idea that the way I do things is, of course, the best way, right? When I watch my husband do I love my husband. He is a 99th percentile guy. But when I watch him do any household project, I am frustrated because he is so detail-oriented. It takes him forever. And when I do it, it might be just a hair crooked, not enough for you to notice, but I'm gonna get it done 3 times faster. So which way do you think I think is better? Yeah, but who agrees with my husband? Man, precision, yeah, that's okay. God wired us differently, it's okay. But I need to not view my way as better, but different, right? We are different people who do things differently. But one of the things that we wanna do is we kind of are just wired. Sin in us makes us want to think our way is better. So instead of having these feelings of superiority, I would say the two things we need to focus on when we're dealing with differences is empathy. Like, can I try to put myself in their shoes and see where they're coming from? Or can I just be curious? This is a word we've used more and more at Hope over the last years. Can I be curious about why they do those things the way that they do? Right? Can I ask more questions? Can I do the, hey, help me to understand question? Can I do like, hey, why do you do that? And even in a voice that tells them I actually am curious. It's not a, why do you do that? Right? Hey, tell me why you're doing that. Those are pretty much the same words, but have an incredibly different meaning. So are we displaying empathy and curiosity to people as we're trying to understand that? And in reverse, so if you're younger, ask, be curious about why people older than you are doing, they've had experience. There's probably a good reason for the way they're doing things. And we can have curiosity across generations instead of just judgment, right? All right, my preferences. I love my preferences. I like to have a lot of fun. I like to laugh. I actually like things to be loud. My husband, on the other hand, likes peace. He likes quiet. He likes calm. And so when I want to enjoy the day with my kids, I rile them up. Still to this day, I rile up my adult children and I get them loud. And my husband's just, I can just see his, ooh. He's a teacher too, so you'd think he'd want to, he'd be used to the noise. Maybe he uses up all his noise space, that's it? Okay, I'm talking to the teacher. You both teach middle school. No, you're doing high school now, right? Yeah, and so, man, he must use up all his noise meter during the day, but I'm like, let's go. And so we have different preferences, and I need to consider my husband's preferences before I ramp up all of the kids, right? And that had to be the case. And so when we think about it in the church setting, there's some people that would still prefer an organ, right? Organ's a beautiful instrument. Anyone here remember the organ days? Yeah. First time my son went to a funeral at a church with an organ, I go, do you know what, he's 5, sitting next to me, and I go, do you know what that instrument's called? And he goes, yeah, the one they play at baseball games. Right? He's just like, nah, 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 nah. You know that? Like, that's all he knows. And so at some point, churches laid down the preference for an organ to move on to different, more modern worship sets because it appeals to an incoming generation. Are we thinking about those things? Are we thinking about the words we use? Are we thinking about the way our slides look? Right? Are we thinking about what welcome means? Right? Are we thinking about the priorities of the people around us that aren't ourselves? And so the opposite is laying down our rights and preferences. And we see this in Jesus, right? Jesus did this all the time, laying down his rights, his preferences. He was God of the universe who took on a human body, went through all of these things, as your pastors so eloquently said, in order to minister to us. He came to be with us, and he laid down his preferences and rights the whole time in order to minister to us and be near us. All right, so those are the roadblocks and on-ramps, and now I'm going to focus on a few tools. So moving on to the tools is the idea of currency. Now this might be like, whoa, we're talking about money in church. I don't necessarily mean money, but currency as defined by dictionary.com is something that is used as a medium of exchange. So each person has their own currency, the whys they do something. So why do most people go to a job? You can shout it out, it's okay. Income, right, we get a paycheck, right? So the currency in our job is like actual money, right? That goes into our account. Maybe most people don't get a physical check anymore, but like it's the money that goes into our account. So people have currency. So as we're thinking through ministering to the next generation, we have to think through the currency of that generation. And for me, I am noticing more and more at age 47, the difference between my currency and a 23-year-old's currency or a 27-year-old's currency, right? And so have we thought about it? So I thought I would just talk about currency so that you could think about what's the currency in our community? Because I don't know River Falls, I don't know your community. It's gonna be different than what we experience in downtown Minneapolis. So I was trying to stay vague here so you could contextualize this for your own group of people. But I did put them into 2 categories, and those are Extrinsic, like things that come from the outside, like money is an extrinsic. Somebody hands me money, I take it, and intrinsic. So the extrinsic currencies that I thought were maybe pretty general are coffee. Anyone, you have that? Are we, like, people really like coffee, and I didn't get any coffee. Do you guys do that free of charge? Great. I've been to churches where I visited a church not so long ago where I was like, oh great, they have coffee just like us. So I go and I fill a glass, and as I started to walk away, the guy behind the counter goes, that's $1. And I was like, oh, there's no sign, nothing tells me. I was like, oh my gosh, I hope I have $1. I did have $1, but you got to think through, like, okay, like, is it worth free coffee to have this sort of culture, right? Food. The one thing I know about college students, and this is college town, right? The one thing I know, because we're a college town too, we're right on the heels of the University of Minnesota. We were actually a church plant to the University of Minnesota, so we have a high number of students, is that if I offer food, they are there. So whether it's Domino's Pizza or better yet, home-cooked meals, they love it and they will come. We do a thing called Study Day, which is coming up next Sunday, where we make wood-fired pizzas or they're gas-fired pizzas in the, like in the uni ovens, taco bar. We set it all up, and we invite students from the U of M, Bethel, Northwestern, and we have a campus called North Central right by us. And we have 150 plus kids in the building all day, and we just wood-fire 150 pizzas, taco bars. It's wild. We have a latte. We bought an expensive latte maker so we could make them caribou equivalents. And we bless them by having them in the building. And many students who come have never been to Hope. Their friends bring them, and they're able to come in the door, and we're able to show them that the church loves them. But for the next generation, what might be the big ticket? Childcare. Right? You're offering something, right? Oh my gosh, childcare. Remember when my kids were little, it was inconvenient. I said nothing's more inherently inconvenient than a small child. I mean, there are things that are more inconvenient, but you probably never choose it, right? And so it's hard to have little kids, and so childcare can be a big thing, just a currency. Resources. Maybe there are people in your community who have needs. I saw you were doing a benevolence fund for the community. Maybe there are resources in your community that speak to a different group of people or a different generation of people. And then the one thing I would consider, and this is not very boomer or Gen Z or Gen X, is time. The younger generations really guard their time very carefully. And so if you're just like, wow, I don't know why nobody will sign up for anything, it's because they guard their time very closely. And so when you think about the volunteer opportunities or the chances they might have for leadership development, break them up in very digestible ways. Because if you're like, hey, I would have jumped into a 15-hour-a-week volunteer job back when I was young, they're not going to do that. They need bite-sized pieces that help them grow into leadership development, to help them see the value of those things. So be careful about how you talk about time and what time requirements people are going to take, because these next generations are very, very protective of their time. All right, intrinsic currencies. These are things that happen on the inside. We can't really gauge them, but these, I would say, are high values for the younger generations. Friendship. Am I going to make friends there? We know that I think like the whole culture of friendship has shifted over the last 25 years. I watch my kids and I watch the young people at Hope try to make friends, and it's really hard. And I don't know if does that carry over into the River Falls area? You know, like everything's on social media. You feel like you have a ton of friends, but you don't really actually have friends and people you connect with, people who you can share your heart with. And so helping people to find opportunities to make real friendships is a big deal. And I think this will be probably one of the big witnesses we have as a church, is how we do community. As our culture changes around us, are we willing to continue meeting? Are we willing to continue to promote having real gospel friendships? The second one is just a feeling of team. If you're on a hospitality team, if you're a greeter in the morning, do they feel like they're part of something? Do they feel like they're a part of a team? Have we explained to them their value to the overall team? Do they see their contribution? And again, and these are all very similar, but I pretty much can't say it enough, is the idea of community. Do they belong? Are they in a place where not only can they know others, but people know them? So we say, are they known are they known and are they knowing others, right? And so do they feel connected to a community? Do you do something like small groups ministry or something that helps them to really know a group of people within the greater church? Because as many people as were here in the morning, you probably can't know everyone, yeah? No, don't know everyone. And so being a part of a community where people know you and they're gonna know if you show up or you don't show up. They're gonna know if you're moving or you're sick or something like that, and they're willing to help you. And the fourth one is something Heather actually reminded me to put on here, is these younger generations are really health conscious. They are not just their physical health, they are, my kids are all clean eaters. I drink a Diet Coke during church. So that's like a big difference, right? So my kids are like, they're like clean eaters, and I have to like value this whole clean eating thing for their sake. But they're also really conscious of their emotional and spiritual and kind of like overall relational health as well. These are words that aren't foreign to them. They're talking about this. So if you're not comfortable yet talking about your emotional health, your mental health, your spiritual health, I would say try to learn language to begin to have discussions about that, because it's of high value to younger people, and they will feel heard and understood if you can speak the language of mental health and the things that are concerning to them. And then lastly, fun. This is a quote my senior pastor, this is one of his few quotes that's made it. People do that which is fun. Are we presenting a culture that's fun? And I know a lot of people grew up in churches, and the church I don't think has been great about utilizing the gifts of joy and laughter and fun. God wired us to enjoy life, and so sometimes we don't think it's okay to laugh in church. We don't think, maybe it seems irreverent or we're not taking God seriously, but I challenge you as a person and as a church community to think through the idea of how can I take God really seriously, but myself a little less seriously? Right? So there's a difference between feeling reverence for God, but then also how can we just show levity and joy and laughter? It's a high value for emerging generations. And their humor is weird by my standards. So you might ask, if you have grandkids or kids who are like 20, ask them what their favorite TikToks are, because to me, sometimes I'm like, I have to ask my kids, tell me why that's funny. And then they'll explain it to me. So you might have to humble yourself and be like, can you tell me why that's funny? Because I just don't get it. And it's not even just that they're using coded Gen Z language, but it's because I just don't get the humor all the time. Also, really funny if you're a TikToker is the Gospel According to Gen Z. Have you seen these yet? Oh my goodness, they are so funny. There's like a series of. Have you guys seen these yet? Gospel According to Gen Z. Yeah, they're hilarious. So I would say go with them. So one of the tools I just wanted to give you there was currency. So going pretty quickly. So again, if we have questions, hopefully we'll see how far I can make it. The next tool I want to talk to is about people being ready and able. So I got this tool, and you see, I think I footnoted it. I got this idea out of a book, which I labeled, but I sort of have tweaked it for the purposes of teaching and added some things to it. But if you want to reference the book, it's definitely in there. But people kind of fall on a spectrum, kind of. So we use this y-axis as one kind of litmus test for where they're at. So they might be very, very willing to do something. Like, yeah, I'm in. They're like a joiner. Everything's, yeah, I'm in. Or they might be really unwilling. Like, I'm just going to sit back here and kind of just hang out, right? And so we kind of can place them on that vertical, but then there's also the horizontal that kind of makes this two-dimensional, right? They're able or they're unable. So that's their skill set. Do they have the skills needed to do that thing you're asking them to do, or do they not? So handing out a bulletin, if somebody doesn't like have a naturally happy disposition, we might want to equip them to have a happy disposition, because you don't want somebody handing out bulletins like this. Here you go, here you go, here you go, here you go, right? That's not what you want as somebody jumps into the church. Or do they not have the ability to physically work a percolator or a drip coffee or whatever, however you guys, like when we started using, we have multiple locations. We have multiple locations at our church, and so we started a new small location, and we had to use percolators. Who knows what a percolator is, right? Our very young church was like, they were just mortified. They were like, what is this thing? And how could you possibly make coffee in it? They were just, because they're like pour over, AeroPress, bougie coffee people, right? And we're like telling them to make maybe the worst coffee in the world, right? And they have no idea. They're like, how does this even do that? I'm like, well, you're a coffee pot. And so I happen to know how to use one. If you don't know what a percolator is, YouTube it, you can figure it out. But they need to know, right? They need to know what they're doing. But that could be on a grander scale. If somebody's delivering a message, right? Or doing something like this, how are they, and as we assess them, where do they fit? So we might look and we might say, I saw it blip and now it's not working. Is your tech guy around? Do you want me to just say next? Oh. Uh-oh. I just got a wave from the booth. He's like, 1 minute. 1 second, 1 minute. Who knows? It could be forever. Well, we'll keep talking. So you might fall into that. You might find like, okay, I'm gonna like assess this person. I'm gonna see like, oh yeah, they actually do. They have a gift of, I can see that sort of, that gift of a shepherd's heart. Yay, thank you. I can see that gift of a shepherd's heart. I see that in them. But they don't feel like they are ready, so they're probably very unwilling, right? So we would put that person in like an able but unwilling category. And this is not so that you can like put a sticker on that says able and unwilling. This is just a tool for you to use, maybe probably without telling them, to help figure out what they need. Because each of these, the goal is to get them to ready and able. Wherever God is gifting them, however the Holy Spirit's gifted them, we want to try to see their unique gifting, and then we want to move them toward that, right? So how do we make them both ready and able? And so it takes different kinds, oops, there's a fancy arrow. It takes different kinds of, that's supposed to say leadership style. The E is at the bottom. You can see what it did there. And so we need to consider how we're actually leading people. All right, so I'm going to give you a little bit of help. I teach a leadership class in LDI, and this has been a helpful tool for a lot of people, so I thought I'd pass this one along. People who are able and unwilling really need like a director. So I think of like every month our middle school and high school kids volunteer to serve in the children's ministry at our church. Some of them are in different categories, but I see this certain 13-year-old boy set that is neither able, they're like, I don't want to talk to a little kid, what would I do with that? And they're like unwilling. They don't have the skill set and they don't want to be there. And so they need somebody to really like be in the weeds with them, micromanage them. Hey, this is how you talk to a 3-year-old. Like this is how you just run in circles. They will follow you. You can run in circles, right? Yes, I can. So they need a director, somebody who's very specific with them about how to do something. But then you have the other category who they have a certain skill set, like you can see how God's gifted them, or they are gifted with the ability to use a percolator, but they're not willing. So that might be showing them vision, casting vision for why do we do this? It's not just an ask for people to come and make coffee. It's showing them the vision for why we actually make coffee. Why do we do this, right? Or they might just need to be encouraged that they do have the skill set. You see it in them, right? And so they need an encourager. People in the other corner need a trainer or a coach, right? They're willing, they want to do it, but they don't maybe possess the right skills to do it yet. Right? So that's where they need a coach or a trainer, right, to walk alongside of them. And the people in the willing and able category, they need a supporter, right? They need somebody who's just going to encourage them, make sure the group stays unified, stays on vision, offers any questions, seeks feedbacks, help to them to improve what they're doing. And I put this out there because we each have a natural leadership style, right? We each have a way we are used to going about doing that. And you can probably see it in your parenting style a little bit. I would say I'm more of a encourager or a promoter, like a hype man, right? I want to get people to do it, but I'm going to do it my natural way to go about it. If I'm not thinking about where that person actually is on that scale, is to just encourage them more and more to do it. So when people don't do it, I'm always like, my encouragement didn't work. My husband, on the other hand, is more of a director. He's going to show them, and then he's going to like watch them, make sure, oh, you tie your shoe differently. You know, like, oh, you don't make 2 bunny ears, you loop swoop, and you know, like, he's going to tell them all of that. But imagine if you are in the upper category of that needs a supporter and someone's directing you. That's really annoying. So we have to now, as the leaders in the church, need to think through how we are leading the people that we're encouraging. So I just encourage you to really think through this. As you're leading other people, are you thinking about your natural leadership style? Are you thinking about that? Or if somebody's training you, now you have the words to describe maybe some frustration, and you can have a real meaningful matter conversation with someone about why you're experiencing frustration as someone who's learning from somebody else, right? Because I worked with an intern once, and I went with my natural style. Kind of when I thought about her, she's gonna actually talk here next week. She was an intern with me, and now she's worked at Hope for years, and now she's gonna be here with you guys next week. But at first, I just was like, come on, Kaylin, you can do it. Come on, jump in. And she was like, just really resistant to jump in. And I was like, encourage, because I saw in her a natural gifting to do those things. But when I thought about and began to even ask her what the deal was, she wasn't, in her mind, she was willing, but she didn't have the skill set. And so I had to shift my way of even thinking about her to match hers and say like, oh, I need to just give you some tools. I need to get some tools in your tool belt so you feel like when you're doing that thing, you're actually equipped to do it. So we need to just think through how we're leading and what people need. All right. And then lastly, and we're going to move through this in 5 minutes, stick the landing, is a decision-making model we use at Hope that might be helpful to all of you. Because sometimes people don't young leaders don't get included because the decision-making model isn't clear. So I thought that I would probably just read to you the decision-making model. We call it DCI. It's just who makes the decision. This look kind of like headstones. Sorry, I don't mean for them to be morbid. Sorry, now that I look at it this way, decide, good thing I didn't make them all black. Decide, consult, and inform. So when you're making decisions as a church, say you're the senior leaders back there, you're probably the decider on a lot of things, but then you gotta ask, okay, maybe who could I delegate that to? Maybe I don't need to be the decider on all those things. And then who am I gonna consult? And consult means, who am I gonna have this conversation? Before I really make a decision, who am I gonna ask? And who am I gonna really ask because I wanna listen, because I wanna learn, because I wanna grow, not because I feel like I have to so nobody gets mad at me in the end or tells me my idea was bad, because then I can say, I talked to a bunch of people. But how are we asking that? So even if we're like, I don't know, switching brands of coffee from, I don't know, Kirkland's to Starbucks. Do you guys have Costco here? Kirkland's, everyone know about Kirkland's best? I don't know, that's the generic name at Costco. Starbucks. I don't know. You're gonna switch, you're gonna upgrade. Am I gonna make a bunch of people upset? Maybe I need to ask if I have the budget or whatever. And then there's inform people. But oftentimes as leaders, we want to make a unilateral decision and then just inform people. Or make a unilateral decision and not tell them and maybe hope they never find out so they don't beef about it, right? And so kind of this DCI model just helps us think through, who could I include in this decision? So as we make decisions, so this first one is in very small font, but it's on your paper. Is this a decision that we can make? Like, should I be making the Starbucks or Kirkland's best decision? Should that be me? Or do we have the authority to make this decision? Should I be asking, is there somebody else I should be making? So this is in our employee handbook, so we follow this. If so, we empower people to make the decision and move forward, thus eliminating the issue. So should we be the one making this decision, or could we let somebody else make the decision, or should it be somebody else, Or do I need to hand this to somebody else? And then consult. So this is the big one. When you're talking about generations, am I handing down some of this power and this authority to different generations? The big thing that people want to do, they want to be actually consulted so that they know their voice matters. Again, it's not just this like lip service to check in, endure the 15-minute conversation. It's actually hearing from them. So is this decision beyond my scope to make in isolation? Would those overseeing me want to speak into this? And most importantly, do we need input from another group before making this decision? Have we thought about the way we're doing things? Have we thought about what the next generation thinks? Have we consulted, right? And then essentially, are we communicating our decisions in a way, I won't read the whole slide, but are we communicating decisions in a way that shows we care about people? Are we really thinking through who needs to be informed about these decisions so we're not just leaving people in the dust as we move forward in things? All right. That was a lot of information in 44 minutes, but I do want to say thank you for having me. Thanks for inviting LDI down and letting us be here. Yeah, you can, it's okay. So I hear I have a little time for questions, but I know some of you may need to get kids, right? If that's okay or whatever. Okay. If we go over, our children's ministry people start to get a little tense. So I don't want to make anybody upset. Do we have any questions? It was a lot of information. Paul said he got questions last week, so I love extemporaneous speaking. So. Oh, right, that's right. Oh, yeah, great. I'm glad I forgot that while I was talking. It's better to not know you're being recorded. Questions? Wow, I was that clear? Yeah, great question. So the question was, how did you experience making this a part of your culture in your church? Yeah, great question. We were blessed with a senior pastor who had been a part of the Navigators ministry. He actually started as a middle school math teacher, then he worked for Navigators, so he worked with college students, and then he decided he wanted to plant a church for college students. And when he did it, one of the things he had in mind was ministering to the next generation. And then not just ministering to them, but raising up, equipping, building God's kingdom. So one of our catchphrases at Hope is to go out into the kingdom of darkness and trash the joint. That's why I mentioned that earlier very unclearly. But we want to build up people so that they can go. Like, we're thankful that Heather didn't stay at Hope after she did LDI. She's here, and hopefully some of those skills that she learned, she's taking away, and she's giving away to different groups of people. So her leadership is activated and out there. So you have to just decide to make it a value. And you need your key leaders, you need your senior leadership, your leadership team, elder team, overseers, whatever you call them, on board for this idea. And then you need to really set aside time. Like in my job, I have 10% of my time just devoted to leadership development. And that's not to me being the director of the Leadership Development Institute. That's me just, when other staff members, we have a pretty large staff team, come into my office, I stop what I'm doing, I let them sit down, and I have a real conversation about whatever is on their mind. So I can do leadership development. It's in my time budget. I'm not so jammed. When I'm working with other volunteers, I'm putting it in their head that, like, who can you always raise up to replace you? Don't ever make yourself irreplaceable. Once you're irreplaceable, that's a real problem, because then when you are gone, whether it's because you physically are gone from the earth or something happened, that ministry can't continue. So you have to really build it in as an idea, as part of your culture. And we were really blessed by day one. Our pastor was like, I really want to do this. I really want to make developing the next generation, not just to get them in the doors of the church so I can see them and know they're saved, but I want to make them as people who want to leave here and they want to go out and they want to be a part of building up God's kingdom in the way God calls them to do. Is that a helpful explanation? So it's more than just seeing their faces in the pews. It's seeing them activated for the kingdom of God, and then them wanting to replicate that in the next generation of people. Yeah, great question. Thank you. Yeah, first blue shirt. Great. Okay, I learned this one the hard way. So the question was, millennials really value their time. So you're dividing the ministry things up into chunks. So how do you have chunky ministry? I love it. Let's call it chunky ministry. I think that'll work. I learned this the hard way. So we were doing an all-church spring retreat, which at the time, we don't do it anymore because it would be too many. We were taking like 550, 600 people on a retreat, which was wild. And we would do small groups with them. And we would write original small group material for the retreat. And as this ministry grew and as Hope was growing, I needed help because I am also the small groups director, and so I was in charge of doing this. So I needed someone to help me write the material. So I asked somebody to lead this, and I asked them to do two things. Write the material with my help, but they would kind of lead the charge, and then I would help edit and offer feedback, and they would recruit and train the small group leaders. In retrospect, that volunteer who I asked to do that was totally gassed. And she was a millennial. She was just really, she for one, really enjoyed the process of writing the material, but didn't necessarily feel like she had the skill set or the energy to also recruit and train volunteers. And it just took a ton of time for her to do that. And I realized, I could see her face. So I did end up swooping in and helping with the recruiting and training because that's more, something I also enjoy. But then the next year, I'm like, okay, these are going to be two separate jobs. I can split this up. So I actually gave a person a partner. So they actually wrote the material in a team. And I became the partner of the person who did the recruiting and training. And so I'm just splitting that up to help them do that. So instead of, you have a volunteer for hospitality, you say service starts at 9:30, and because there's a lot of jobs to do, you now need to get here at 7:30. So you need to have 2 hours of things to do, maybe cutting that down and creating a little bit larger team so people only have to be here at, 8:30. And so it just takes less time. So just thinking through how can we divide things up into more bite-sized manageable pieces that really work in the mind of people who are busy, and believe themselves to be time-starved. And we live in a pretty time-starved culture, right, with all the things that are going on. And I think millennials in particular guard their time really highly because they've watched the kind of burned out workaholic boomer Gen X generations, and they're like, ooh, I'm not doing that. And so they have kind of they've swung that pendulum from workaholic to afraid to becoming a workaholic. And so we can help them kind of scoot that pendulum back to kind of a more healthy ground as we hopefully are considering how we can do that as well. Is that helpful at all? Yeah, okay, hopefully. Yeah. Yes, so the question was, do we do any gifts, assessments for gifts or personality assessments? And we do, yes, we do. We do a lot of those. I actually teach a class where that's what we do. And so it's hundreds of people have been through this. We call it SHAPE class. We actually borrowed the acronym from, I think another church, but we don't teach any of from Rick Warren's church. But we don't teach any of their content. We put our own content in it, and it's spiritual gifts, heart, which means what are you passionate about, abilities, and in that one we use the Strength Finder assessment. Have you guys heard this? The Strength Finder one from Gallup. Encourage this. And then we talk about personality. What's your unique personality? And in this one, we use the Myers-Briggs assessment. And then we talk about experiences. So we walk people through these different things, but we have used different tools along the way for our staff team and for congregants. You can go online and find a lot of spiritual gifts assessments. We don't have one in particular. We've never created our own. And the one we have currently used is not available to the public, but another church somewhere in Wisconsin allows us to have a secret pass into it because we've used it for so long in our class. So I couldn't get you that, but I think there'll be a lot of good tools out there. And I think those tools are good in one sense because it helps people to have common language. So if I say to you, I'm an introvert, or you're an introvert and I'm an extrovert, we now have common language to discuss our similarities or differences, right? And that might guide us in something. Or I have the spiritual gift of leadership and you have the spiritual gift of mercies. That's going to impact the different roles we might feel drawn to in the church or might find that God is really going to bless once we're in them, right? And so I think that's really good. I think it can be tough when people are like, I can't move forward unless I know exactly what I'm doing. You see that sort of analysis paralysis or fear of failure. So how do we encourage people to keep moving forward? So somebody said, what's my spiritual gift? I would say the best thing that you can do is like ask what the church needs, try out that thing and see how God uses you in it. And if you flourish and you're really blessed in it, I would say it's probably a good indication of a spiritual gift. So some of it's just giving people the encouragement to try. But I do like some of those assessments because it just helps us understand ourselves a little bit better, but what they can also do is cause us to be very like self-focused. So we have to remember that we're not learning necessarily about our personality or our strengths in order to know ourselves better so that we can think highly of ourselves. It's so that we can know ourselves better so that we can see the beauty in God's creation, the differences in how we're made, and then move into service for the kingdom of God. And so we do have some, and more than happy to share that curriculum with you guys if that's something you'd want to try out. We give it away a lot. So, yeah. Great question. How do you plan activities? Because sometimes participation can waver, it can lag. And do you mean like participation can lag in certain age groups of people or just in general? Yeah, you really have to think through, do you guys know the phrase zero-sum game? So there's this idea of things are either a zero-sum game or they're a non-zero-sum game. So a non-zero-sum game means that you have endless resources and people have endless amounts of time. And if you create things, they will come to things. And I think we sometimes view the activities at church like that. Like people are just going to have endless time and we can plan an endless amount of things and people will still come. But truly people live in a zero-sum game, which means, for example, they have 100 units of time that they're considering, and maybe 30 of those are sleep, 40 of those are their job, 20 of those are their kids. So now we got this like 10 units left, and we have to really be thoughtful about all the things and events we plan as church leaders, because we can actually just kind of plan so much that people don't know what to attend. And so they don't. So you have, as a church, and the leaders in your church probably need to think through what are your highest priorities. Like if you could pick the one night a week, what do you really, really want people to come to? At Hope, we say we want them in a small group. If they've only got one night to give, we want them in a small group. We want them committed to other people's things. So we push hard, small group, small group, small group, small group, small group. So they'll go as a family to a small group. You guys might not have the same priorities, and that's not a value statement. You might have different things. But if you plan so many things, people don't know what to prioritize and what's going to be the way that they're going to connect best with other people. So you have to consider your values. What is this thing meant to accomplish, and is that the highest value to the church? So maybe even sorting out, like, how many opportunities do we have, or how many nights of the week are we actually calling, especially young adults and young parents too? Because now for me, I just empty nested this year. Man, I all of a sudden do I feel free. I can make dinner. I don't have to please anyone with the dinner I make, but I also don't have to be home to see anyone. So I find myself being like, sure, I'll do that. I'd go to that. But that's not true for people with young kids, and it's not true for young people who view time a little bit differently than me. I think that is it. All right, thank you, everybody. Oh,
yeah. Let's express our appreciation. I just wanted to take a moment because, first of all, I want to thank the high school students who have been coming during this. So, I think we should give them a hand, and and it is cool that you guys are investing in the future in that. But I did want to say, do you guys have any questions or a comment that you would like to make as younger people than the older people here? I'm sure she's got all the answers, so the opportunity. Well, I just wanted to open up that space, but thank you so much.
Staff a Gen Z quiz.
A Gen Z quiz?
Slang quiz. It's really funny.
All right. We'll have to do that. So, and maybe they can develop it. That'd be more fun. So would you bless us, though, and bless our church and just pray for us on this? Because it's been fantastic, and we really appreciate you coming.
Awesome. Yes, please pray with me. God, I thank you so much for this group of people here, for this local church that loves you. And I saw that in an ability to worship and hear from Word of God and see people being in community together today. It is a huge gift to move outside of my own scope and see what God is doing in other places. What a gift. Thank you for this group of people who has blessed me today. I felt loved and cared for, and I pray that they would continue to feel your presence moving as they gather on Sundays to worship you and to join each other in community, Lord, but also throughout the week as they plan events and as they participate in each other's lives and as they move out into the community beyond the borders of their church community, Lord. I thank you for this group, and I pray as we all move forward that we would consider your heart for the next generation, that your goodness and your mercies are new, not only every morning, but that you pass those on from generation to generation, and that we would consider the next generation as we begin to move forward. Thank you for the hearts of people who are willing to learn and grow. Meet us in the areas where that is difficult for all of us, where sin encumbers, where pride gets in the way, Lord. Meet us in the midst of that. Help us to see that and help us to know your grace is sufficient, that Jesus paid the price for all of our sin. And we can move forward with confidence, finding our value and our worth in you, Lord. In your name we pray. Amen.